Elizabeth III, last of her house, just might be inevitable. Sharing a common father's 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 father, legally though perhaps not biologically, Harald V of Norway and Charles III of, let's pick a random Commonwealth realm, St. Kitts and Nevis, are the only current heads of state remaining from their patrilineal house, all the sons of the medieval Counts of Oldenburg. House of Oldenburg counts, dukes, kings, czars, and precisely one queen have headed states covering over a third of the planet's land. At first glance, this male line's time on thrones appears to be slowly running out. Two phenomena have combined to steer European monarchies like Norway's and the UK's toward eventual inheritance by commoner patrilineages. With the end of male preference, daughters inherit these thrones much more often. And as they're no longer marrying other royals, dynasties no longer shuffle around the map as in early modern times. Now, at this point in history, 2025, no one really expects the 21st and 22nd centuries to be expected. And this video won't be conventional either. It will lay out scenarios for the long-term future, aware that long-term trends can accelerate or reverse. While I would confidently say Elizabeth III, if offered a prize to pay out in 2201 as to the name of the last Oldenburg monarch, I'll complicate that conclusion here, with radical life extension, mind uploading, space colonization leading to new Commonwealth realms across the solar system, Romanov-ruled artificial gravity space settlement states, and a wide range of options for political transformation, everything from the near-term abolition of the Norwegian and British monarchies to royal patrilineage presidential candidates, to a reversal of 20th century liberalization trends back to full-stack aristocracy, including a return to royals marrying royals. Futurists have so often made two critically flawed assumptions, that the arc of social history cannot be forced backwards, and that accelerating technologies will have minimal impact on the personal or the political. Neither assumption is aging well. But for the moment, so that we can lay out the cast of characters, let's start by pretending Futurism is simple. If so, the reign of that one sole Oldenburg queen can be said to have pointed to the ultimate cause of the dynasty's technical end. Not to become extinct, as there are several dozen living men to pass it on, but to be definitively and permanently dethroned. When Margrethe II of Denmark abdicated last year, she was succeeded by her son Frederick X, whose patrilineage, his father's line, traces to a wealthy family from southwestern France, who were legally denied nobility status but called themselves counts anyway. Thus, Oldenburg's 565 years on the Danish throne ended. In 1953, the Danish people had replaced male-only primogeniture with the British model of male preference, allowing the brotherless Princess Margrethe to become monarch instead of her uncle. By the 1960s, royals rarely married other royals, so the move to a commoner patrilineage was basically set. If the future somehow holds no surprises, the same is set to happen in Norway in 3 generations, when Queen Ingrid's throne passes to her child. Then, after an unknown number of generations, Elizabeth III of whatever Commonwealth realms remain completes the world's final Oldenburg reign. Now, legally, this makes no difference whatsoever. European constitutional monarchies are no longer families shuffling feudal domains. They're national constructs with rules that are defined by national parliaments. So the house names remain the same. Elizabeth II and Charles III were both of Windsor. Elizabeth III and let's call her heir James VIII would be too. But this thought exercise is about the traditional male-line dynasties. Now that the crowns of Norway, the UK, etc. practice full primogeniture, which is a depth-first search algorithm where younger brothers no longer cut older sisters in line, Ingrid Alexandra's path to the Norwegian throne has been secure since her birth. We can predict the same about the not even close to being born yet next firstborn daughter of an expected British king, for whom the most auspicious and most likely name choice would be Elizabeth, who, born long after Ingrid of Norway, would be last of her house, in theory. Let's demolish that certainty for Norway first, then move on to the much better-known British case, then look at possibilities for the dethroned German, Danish, Greek, and Russian lines. The scenarios where Princess Ingrid Alexandra does not become Norway's final Oldenburg monarch are as follows, ranked in order of probability from just plausible to probably not to why the hell did I even think about that. Number 1, Norway becomes a republic, abolishing the monarchy before Ingrid would have inherited it. 2, Ingrid has no children and is survived by her brother Sverre Magnus, continuing the house, or by her aunt, which would lead right back to monarchy abolition. 3, Ingrid marries and has a child with a distant patrilineal cousin from another Oldenburg branch, or one of her descendants does. Or 4, Norwegian culture experiences, along with the rest of the world, some conservative backlash so extreme that the succession laws reverted to a pre-1971 state of male line only. As far as the Norwegian Republic goes, while outsiders pretty much think of monarchy in Scandinavia as secure, support for the monarchy is now down to 62%, largely on the gang affiliation, diplomatic passport abuse, and SA charges of the Crown Prince's stepson. So it's not out of the question. The other possibilities are much less likely. Sverre Magnus inheriting could happen, and not just by untimely death or abdication. We never really talk about how weird it is that we just assume particular people will choose to have children in the distant future, but his inheritance would just delay the inevitable. The same is true in the British case, by the way. A theoretically unenthusiastic or unconvinced Prince George could be succeeded by his sister Charlotte, in which case no Elizabeth III in the House of Oldenburg. Or George's firstborn could be a boy, which just delays the coin flip another generation. In a much less likely scenario, dethroned Oldenburg branches are rethroned. One path to this could be Ingrid Alexandra's marriage to a fellow Oldenburg of her generation, like a son of the former Crown Prince of Greece, a Count Danaskil Samsa from an illegitimate line of Christian V of Denmark, or a cousin of the AFD deputy leader from the deposed Herzog von Oldenburg family. As an aside, the fortunately very small, please let this be true, probability that Beatrix von Storch will add all of Germany to places that have had an Oldenburg head of state reminds me of another possibility. Federal presidents and all presidents are also heads of state. The word is different from king, and the tone, but presidents are essentially term-limited elected monarchs who have a lower but definitely far from zero chance of having a child hold the same position. Technically, California-born Lilibet Mountbatten Windsor could run for and win the U.S. presidency, provided only she relinquish her title. Not that the nobility clause necessarily prohibits this, but the electorate probably would. Anyway, back to royal heads of state. Equal primogeniture swept most of Europe, so there is an upcoming age of queens in Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, and Sweden, any one of whom could marry a male line Oldenburg, especially if certain current retro-social trends accelerate. Or as it becomes clear that part of what has appealed and continues to appeal to monarchists about royal families was their separation from links to common families. Although this probably wouldn't rise to the level of national dynastic unions as in times past, due to nationalist concerns, it's not technically impossible that, say, Sweden could return to the Oldenburg fold, as it enters a personal union with the UK under Elizabeth III first, daughter of King George VII of the UK and Queen Estelle of Sweden, with the countries remaining fully separate and sovereign. No, I don't think that's at all likely, but it's a way to bring up the concept of personal union, which the 15 Commonwealth Realms under King Charles III already are. It's almost certain that a number of realms will abolish the monarchy during the reigns of Charles and William, likely starting with Caribbean countries following Barbados' exit. But the UK itself could in theory abolish the monarchy, even with a simple majority in Parliament like in 1649, although they'd almost certainly not do so without a referendum. Yet, if Britain abolishes the monarchy, that doesn't automatically remove the institution from the constitutions of other states. Canada requires all 10 provinces to assent to that level of constitutional change, so we could see the King of Canada holding on to his throne because, let's say, Prince Edward Island and Quebec don't assent. Quebec not because of any attachment to the British monarchy, or Britishness of course, but because the bloc won't agree to the new ceremonial office of Canadian President until there's a guarantee that the President must be Quebecois when the Prime Minister isn't. Or the monarchy could hold on in Tuvalu alone, because it helps the international prestige of the Sovereign Wealth Fund managing the resources of the now fully submerged Polynesian islands. On the other hand, the number of Commonwealth realms could increase, like with the UK breakup, or 22nd century space colonization. There's nothing stopping a consortium of hollowed-out asteroids or O'Neill cylinders from becoming a legally separate Commonwealth realm, a country in space. There's also nothing inherently stopping the restoration of monarchies, either on Earth, should public opinion demand it, or in this interplanetary context. There's already a microstate organization called Imperial Throne that's legally headed by a matrilineal Romanov heir and tied to millionaire Anton Bakov's Russian monarchist party. Why couldn't a 22nd century Russian state collude with some effort like this to create some kind of space-based outlet for monarchist sentiment, or an Orthodox Vatican? Later on, this might evolve into the Romanov Star Empire. Finally, now that we're firmly in the sci-fi sounding realm, the timescale for all of this may be off. By 2050, medical technology might be effectively de-aging people and lengthening their life expectancy by more than 1 year per year, allowing 2201 to have youthful bicentenarians, while economic technologies remain effective at limiting this opportunity to the wealthy, despite the fact that any radical life extension couldn't have been developed without the accumulated toil of billions, and despite 2201's million-fold larger economy, making global post-scarcity for food and healthcare something we just keep failing to choose. So Princess Elizabeth might be sunning on the Kingdom of Scotland's offshore subtropical beaches, 148 but looking 28, waiting for her father George VII's promise to abdicate at 200 like his father did. Yes, that's today's Prince William. Hey, a small, overly optimistic part of me is still holding out for my age cohort and social class to qualify, and I certainly won't if William doesn't. But if I do, pay up in 2201, I called it. Elizabeth III, last of her house.